Where is the front line for North Korean ministry? If I were to ask you that question, you might think China, the border between North Korea and China. You might think the border with North Korea and Russia, or even the border between North and South Korea, or of course, inside North Korea itself. But what if I were to tell you that the front line of North Korean ministry is right here in Seoul, South Korea? In fact, it may even be in this very classroom in which we're standing. I want to tell you today about 3 centers or schools that Voice of the Martyrs Australia supports in order to aid the ministry of underground North Korean Christians. One of them is called Underground University, or UU. The second one is called Underground Technology, or UT. And the third one is the Refugee Resettlement Centers operated by the South Korean government here in South Korea. In each of these 3 locations are North Koreans who have escaped from North Korea. Most of the time they cross through China and a third country and they come here to South Korea. And they're automatically received as citizens because the North and South Korea territories are still technically at war. So anyone who is North Korean is by definition also a South Korean citizen. So when North Koreans come here, they're granted citizenship and they receive a settlement package, but many of them feel lost. They don't know what to do. Their heart is still in North Korea. They didn't leave because they wanted to. They left typically because of either they had to, they felt that they were going to be killed, or they left because of economic desperation. But one of the things that's most important about North Koreans in South Korea is that more than 70% of them stay in monthly contact with their relatives inside of North Korea. If you were to ask me how that's possible, I would say that you and I would probably try to find any way to stay in contact with our relatives too, if we were separated from them. So North Koreans use a variety of methods, from cell phones to couriers to mail, in different ways to be able to reach their relatives. But 70% of North Koreans here in South Korea are communicating every month with their relatives inside North Korea. And that's why we call this the front line of North Korean ministry. Because if North Koreans here in South Korea can learn to share the gospel according to the traditional methods of the North Korean Underground Church, they will be able to share with more North Koreans more freely, more often than any other North Koreans anywhere in the world. And so our 3 centers that are funded in part due to your support are vital in that effort. All North Koreans, when they come to South Korea, the first place they end up is the Refugee Resettlement Center. And interestingly, about 30% of the North Koreans who come to South Korea have some connection with Christianity inside of North Korea. They may not even realize it until they leave, but they may have come from a Christian family. A lot of times, it's only later that they realize that their family taught them certain songs or certain stories that were from the Bible. Or they may see their relatives remember their grandparents doing this, closing their eyes, bowing their head, and moving like this. And they don't realize until they find out later from Christians that what they were doing was praying. But about 30% of North Koreans who escape from North Korea have either a Christian heritage or some connection they discover to the Christian faith. And we meet those people at Hanawan. Interestingly, often those people are told not to share their stories publicly. The government doesn't want to create any difficulties between North and South Korea. So often those people's stories, for years, they remained untold. But thanks to the support of Voice of the Martyrs Australia, Voice of the Martyrs Korea is able to go and to meet every North Korean who comes into South Korea at the refugee resettlement centers. We're able to share the gospel with them according to traditional North Korean methods, and we're able to get to know them. And that's how we make contact with many of the underground North Korean Christians who we meet, who otherwise we may never know. In fact, the story, These Are the Generations, the book that I wrote was from people that we met through the Hanawan program. Now, when North Koreans come to South Korea, typically when they come, they're not so much looking for political freedom or personal freedom. What they're trying to do is to help their families to survive inside North Korea. So either they left because of the fact they were being hunted by the government, or they left to try to make money to send it back to their relatives. And a lot of times that's why they're staying in touch with their relatives inside of North Korea. But what they quickly find is, due to the difference in dialect, which is about a 40% difference between North and South Korea, and the difference in skills, North Koreans are not well suited for a market economy, and it's even difficult for the older ones to be able to go to school and to learn how to function well here. That's why the rate of death due to suicide of North Koreans in South Korea is nearly 20%. It's among the highest rates of suicide in recorded history. And so North Koreans are at a loss to know how to help their families. And so when we go to the refugee resettlement centers and we share with them that God has a plan and a purpose for them here in South Korea, they want to know more about it. And so they come to UT, or Underground Technology. It's kind of a funny name in English, but what it conveys in Korean is that what they're learning is the basics or the fundamentals of the Christian faith as it's taught in the North Korean underground church. And so they come, and for a year they learn North Korean church history, North Korean methods of sharing the gospel, North Korean, the songs, hymns that are most popular in the North Korean underground church. In other words, we're acting as the extensions of the North Korean church to be able to teach them what they would be learning if they were underground Christians inside North Korea. Many of them choose to continue on to the UU, or Underground University program. That's our missionary training program. And for 1 to 4 years, they are learning how to serve as missionaries wherever North Koreans are found. And that's not only inside North Korea, that's in China, Russia, Southeast Asia, Mongolia, Dubai, Libya. Even in Europe, there are countries where North Koreans go to do construction work, or they go as students, or they go to work in factories or in fields. And so we're equipping these North Koreans with traditional North Korean methods of discipleship and evangelism to reach other North Koreans wherever they're found. So along the way, they're not just spending time learning here in the classroom, and this is where we are recording this video, is in our UU and UT classroom. But from the moment they arrive here, they're actually going out and they're doing field work. We're training them by having them visit hospitals where North Korean defectors are. We take them to prisons because there are North Korean defectors in prison. We take them to different cities so that they can practice doing evangelism on other North Korean defectors here in South Korea. So our UT students are learning by evangelizing and discipling their own families. Our UU students are learning by evangelizing and discipling other North Koreans that they've never met before, but who live here in South Korea. And then as part of that training, as they advance on in UU, they go with us to other countries, and they go with us to some very difficult and dangerous places. And along the way, they become equipped for ministry. I wish I had longer to be able to tell you all the people who have graduated from Underground University that you've helped to put into the missionary field, who are serving as pastors of other North Korean Christians or missionaries. Even today, they are in some of the most difficult places on earth doing ministry because of the fact of your support. You can pray for all of the North Koreans who come into South Korea. Every year, that's between 1,000 to 2,000 people. You can pray for our UT students. Every year we have about 20 to 25, and our UU class is about the same size. Pray for all of them. They're not just preparing for ministry for the future. They're doing ministry today. They're not just learning in a classroom, but they're learning in the field. And they're not just practicing for a future day when North Korea may be open to the gospel. They are reaching North Koreans wherever they are found today. Over the years, what we've seen is that no one is more effective at reaching North Korean people than other North Koreans. It's funny. It was a great South Korean missionary, really had a heart for North Koreans, and we were supporting his work in a country. North Koreans would come and he would disciple them, and we brought our North Korean students there to be able to do a short-term program to reach the North Koreans at his base. That night, the first night when they were all there in the dormitory by themselves, the North Koreans who were being discipled by the South Korean man asked our North Korean students, "Look, we know the South Koreans talk about God, but we need to hear it from you. Is God real?" And our North Korean missionary trainees could say, "Yes, he is." And they could communicate the gospel both in North Korean dialect in a way that North Koreans can understand. So we thank God for all of the missionaries from South Korea, Russia, and even Australia who reach out to North Korean people. But we most thank God for Voice of the Martyrs Australia's support of North Koreans to be able to reach other North Koreans for Christ. It is the most effective ministry that's being done in North Korea on the front line today, right here from Seoul, South Korea.